Is that correct? Okay, all right. Again, I want to welcome everyone to class this morning. And we will be studying the second lesson in the series of Zechariah. And then we'll ask Bill Ard, if he would, now to lead us in prayer as we begin our class. We will actually be beginning from Zechariah chapter 3, verse 6 and following. But before we start there, I'll go back a little bit of background of what's the purpose of the writings at all, and a little bit of what brought them to this location. By way of timeline, historical timeline, I just want to let you know what's happened that brought them to this place at this time. Going back a few years, in 539, the Persian people defeated the Babylonian people in that area, and therefore they were able to look around and say to the Jewish people, well, it's time for you to go. We would be happy for you to leave us. We don't hold you as enslaved people as the Babylonians did. And so they made preparations under Cyrus in 538 for the beginning Jewish remnant to go back to Jerusalem. And even as part of that agreement, they said that we would send back the temple items that had been taken from their 70 years previously. And in so doing, they set up the Zerubbabel and the others who would go back to what is now the destroyed rubble of Jerusalem and begin to rebuild the circumstances and places there. However, in 537, they got there, and they started looking around and started planning how they would rebuild everything. And about a year, it says in Ezra, about on the second month, they started actually building the foundations of the temple. They were opposed by their neighbors, to put it politely. There was a lot of opposition. And in fact, what brings us to this lesson and brings us to these series of visions is the fact that the people were very, very discouraged. They were very disappointed with their leaders. They didn't know who to have confidence in. They were really upset with their priests. And there were just so many things that were, shall we say, at loose ends, not resolved. They just didn't have someone to follow. And in so doing, this is where God realizes that these people need comforting words. They need direction. They need encouragement. And so this is what brings us to this series of visions that Zechariah will experience. Zechariah and Malachi, his contemporary, saw his visions and began his writings in 520 BC. So this is really about a span of about 14 or 15 years from the time the foundation was laid until they actually started reconstructing the remains of what went on, what was the temple itself. So can you imagine walking up to a 15-year-old construction site where nothing had been done? Can you imagine having neighbors and people in your area opposing you, causing trouble? How about having no confidence in your leaders, not really trusting the fact that the guy that they sent to do the job is going to be able to get it done? That was their point of discouragement. And so, God brings the word through his angels to Zechariah. In 520, there's a series of 8 visions that came to him, and some would say that they all probably happened on the same night. Now, let's step back for just a moment and look at the book of Zechariah. The book of Zechariah is actually in 2 parts. Chapters 1 through 8 were written while the temple was being rebuilt. And so it deals with issues relating to that problem that we've discussed already. The second part of the book, chapters 9 through 14, actually look forward. They look forward not only just to the immediate times, but actually the prophecies go into the time of Jesus, both his first time that he comes to the earth, and even prophecies about the second time when he will return. This part of the book also deals with issues related to the other countries about, what would be both the ones who become friends with the restored Judah and those who oppose them. So that part of the book we'll be looking at in further weeks to come. But at this part now, we will just deal with the specific visions that we saw. By way of review, the first vision that came was, just one second here. Okay. The first vision, he starts out with, actually, before the first vision, even chapters 1 through 6, it says, I want to return to you so you will return to me. He's setting up the issue of coming back together. Then that's the problem that will be solved, is the joining of God and his people. So in the first vision, we saw a man riding a red horse. And there were 3 other horses of different colors, black and white, gray, all that. And these horses were out to patrol the earth, as it were. And they came back with a report of, well, the earth is at peace. Things are quiet. But the quiet of a warring person is not quiet. It's potential destruction and everything else. And sure enough, God says, No. They may be quiet, but it's the quiet of their up to something. Remember, we all had those 3-year-old children who were quiet and who knew that something was going to happen afterwards. That's where they were at this vision. So the angel asked God in the end of this vision, says, why have you not taken care of my people? Why is you have no compassion for Jerusalem? And God answers, he says, I will be very jealous for Jerusalem. I will make it way back for them to come to me. So he's announcing the fact that their problems will be addressed, their problems will be solved. The angel says in chapter 1, verse 14 and 15, says to proclaim, saying, the Lord of hosts, I am exceedingly jealous for Jerusalem and Zion. But God was exceedingly angry with those nations that are at ease. In the second vision, it's even simpler. There were 4 horns. Now we think of a ram's horn, for example, as a horn that you communicate in battle. So there were 4 horns representing 4 countries, not really named, but obviously Assyria and Babylonia were a couple of them. And there were 4 craftsmen who would destroy these horns, signifying that God is going to deal with those countries that oppose the Jewish people. Very simple explanation. He was going to provide comfort for them. In the third vision, there was a man who came about with a measuring line. Today we would call them surveyors. They were getting ready to construct some building or construct a road or something. But in this case, they were measuring to construct or rebuild Jerusalem. And God actually says to them, you're not going to need to build a wall here, because this city is going to be so prosperous, so full of people, so full of animals and cattle that you can't contain them. I, God, will provide a wall of fire about it, around it. I will protect the city. Again, an encouragement to these people to say, good times are coming. Just be with us. Finally, in the fourth vision, where we actually pick up kind of our solid lesson today, is the high priest is restored. Last week we talked about the fact that Satan was accusing the high priest, and God was saying, no, he is absolved, he is forgiven of his sin. Put a new robe on him, put a new turban on him. He and the other rest of the priesthood are now resolved. So that took the burden of doubt about the priests from the people. They now have one or a series of men who will communicate and mediate with God about them for their sin with God. Now, to begin really where we pick up at 3:6 is the fact that these people now, that is the priests, are going to have a serious, serious responsibility to maintain the proper righteousness of their positions of themselves, maintain the righteousness of the people of God in who would worship at the temple. In giving him this charge, he says that you have to realize that he is now giving the priest Joshua, not the Joshua that came back, but the other Joshua, who's the high priest now, by the way, the responsibility and the opportunity to come into the presence of the Lord, just like he was an angel or anyone else. As he comes into the Holy of Holies each year, he is in the presence of the Lord. He will be able to communicate directly. It's an awesome responsibility that these priests will have, but that they should be worthy, and they are now being deemed worthy of being to approach God, as it were. He will have access to the throne. The priesthood in verses 8 and 10 now was a symbol of what God had done for them in the past and what he was going to do for them in the present and in the future, rather. He says he's going to have several ways that he will bless them. He talks of a branch that will come among them. Now, this branch actually, you could say, well, maybe it's Joshua the leader, or it's the one who would build the temple, or anything else like that, Zerubbabel. But actually, if you look at it very carefully, it's pointing in the direction of the Messiah, who was not only the king, but also the high priest, fulfilling both of those purposes. And you can see that he's giving them as a blessing in the future. He was also going to engrave this stone that is talked about with 7 eyes and 7 places. Basically, God being able to see about the earth and to control, that is, he has power over the earth. And he's going to put this on maybe similar to the one that he put on the breastplate of the high priest. Basically, it's Joshua's task to maintain the renewed righteousness and properly fulfill the priestly function. Another promise that he makes there at the end of 10 is that he would remove the sin in one day. Yes, sir. Yes.
Or Lord of the army.
Mm-hmm.
And even in verse 10, as you were saying, even as he's talking to the priesthood, he's saying Lord of hosts, and fully demonstrating his power over all those around him that might oppose him.
Absolutely. Absolutely. These people are going to go from a cowering, a fear of those around him, to understanding that God is in charge. And we will see in the last vision, God is going to take care of those who oppose him, be they nations about. Yes. Anyone else? I've been doing a lot of the talking kind of because I had so much. Anyone? Okay. He said he would remove sin in one day. Now, in that case, you've got the issue of sin in the camp, sin in the country. You look forward to 2 different things. One is he's going to have a shall we say, a nice country. There's not going to be a bunch of ne'er-do-wells and rabble-rousers any longer. They're going to be nice people who follow God's ways. But he's also looking forward to the time when Jesus himself would remove sin also in one day or at one point in time. So you can see both 2 interpretations. Going now to chapter 4. the entire chapter, actually. He sees a lampstand. We'd think of it as like a menorah. A lampstand with 7 lamps upon it, 7 pipes coming from it, 7 lights. Some ways you could say that there's even sort of 49 little sources of light there, but we won't worry about what it looked like so much as the fact that here was a lampstand, and on both sides of it were 2 olive trees. And from those olive trees, there were golden pipes that led to the lampstand. And in a way, in one interpretation, there's 2 interpretations, but in one interpretation, here is the oil coming from the trees, refreshing the lamp as it is continuously illuminated, lit. The question becomes, he's going to talk about the lampstand, and then he's going to talk about Zerubbabel and how they will have confidence in him as one of the leaders, or as the leader of the government, as it were, to put this country back together, to build the building of the temple and to complete it, to give them the confidence to complete it. This is encouraging. Going now to 4 verse 6, or let's 4, 5, and 6. The angel answered to him, answered the question of what is before you. And the angel says, this is the word of the Lord to Zerubbabel. Not by might, nor by power, but by my Spirit, says the Lord of hosts. Remember, Zerubbabel had laid the foundations years earlier and was discouraged and gotten away from that task. He then picks up now and is being told he will be able to solve the problem of an unbuilt temple. But it won't be him. It won't be his might. It won't be his authority. It won't be his doing of it. It will be God's Spirit. God will encourage the people to accomplish the task. And in so doing, the proper authority for the building of the temple will be recognized. 2 things will happen. 1, Zerubbabel will be recognized as a legitimate authority to oversee this program. And 2, it will be recognized that it will be God who is overseeing the program and not a bunch of people who had previously been discouraged from doing so. That's probably the most important part of the thing to realize about the rebuilding of the temple. It's God's Spirit that did it. Now, in this effort, verse 7, he talks about the lampstand, then he talks about Zerubbabel, and he talks about the problems that Zerubbabel is going to overcome. In verse 7, he says, who are you, O great mountain, that before Zerubbabel you will become a plain? Meaning, 2 possible interpretations. A specific interpretation is, here's all this rubble, or here's all this stuff that's unbuilt in front of you as that building site. The other interpretation of the mountainous problem is the fact that here are the people who are discouraged, who are oppressed, who are without confidence in their leaders, who don't know where they're going, and really are still in the sinful condition in some cases that keeps them from God's relationship. And he's saying to them, this will be overcome. Whether it be a building site, it will be cleaned and leveled and prepared for building. whether it be a people with all of their issues and all of their problems, they will be addressed. They will learn confidence. They will be able to say, we have dealt with sin, we have dealt with the confidence in our leaders, and we are accomplishing what God would have us to do in a relationship with Him. That's two ways of looking at it. He reassures Zerubbabel that he had laid the foundation and he will finish the job by laying the capstone. That is the very last stone to be put in place in the building. And they will be greatly cheered by doing so. He was also reminded that some people really are just say little bitty things don't count, don't matter. He mentions this in verse 10. For who has despised the day of small things? And in the plumb line, and for these rejoice over to see the plumb line in the hand of Zerubbabel. They're saying that take the little things and respect them, because God is going to take things from the little things like that, like that poor old job site over there where they're going to build the temple. And He will honor the small things about. Finally, the angel gets to answer the question of who are these olive trees on the right and left stand. In verse 11 it says, and I answered unto him, what are these two olive trees at the right and left? And I further answered and said unto him, why are these olive trees that drip into the receptacles of the two golden pipes from which the oil drains? And then he answered me, do you not know who they are? And I said, no, my Lord. And he said, these are the two anointed ones who stand beside the Lord of the whole earth. That is, Zerubbabel on one side and Joshua on the other are the men that I have selected, appointed, anointed, and they will be your leaders in my name. That overcame the problem that the people were having with their leadership. Finally, we come to the first of three, I would call them judgmental visions. These are smaller, so don't have to worry about as much time. The three judgmental visions are first the flying scroll. The Old Testament, or the law, was written on scrolls. That's rolled out of paper and rolled it back the other way. But this scroll was more like a flying carpet in that it was 15 feet one direction and 30 feet the other. And here was the entire law written on both sides of it. It's to tell the people that we're going to be accountable to the law as it is written. He deals with two specific sins, but generally they can be used for all of the sins of the people. One is stealing, theft, and the other one is, I won't use just the term lying, but I'll really say committing false witness, in the sense that you make a statement, a sworn statement by God, and you break that statement. So you've declared a false statement, and in so doing, you've broken the confidence because it is not true. God is simply saying here, these people will be measured. And if you look a little further on there, it says, not only will the thieves be expelled and removed, but also I'm going to send a curse out, and I'm going to even, in verse 4, enter the house of the thieves and the house of the one who swears falsely, and remain in the midst of this house, and I will consume it, its timber, and its stones. God is dealing with sin within the country as one individual at a time, one by one. He's purging them. He's making them whole, as it were. The next vision is the woman in the basket. Again, we see something before us. This basket is called an ephah. It's a measure of volume, dry volume. We use cups and quarts and all that at a dry volume. All of us are probably familiar with bushel baskets. Well, this ephah happens to be a basket. And depending on who it is that you're asking, it's either a content of about equivalent of around 7.5 gallons or 9 gallons. Medium-sized basket, a little bit bigger than a bushel basket. And this is covered by a lead covering of a plate or lid. And the basket is opened, and inside is a woman. Now, don't get me on the scales about this. You know, you women have to be either really small or the basket has to be really big to hold a regular-sized woman. But we're talking about the story here, not about the graphics. But you would think that she tries to make an escape, and it says that the angel puts that cover down really quick to contain her and says that she is wickedness. Now we're dealing with the sin of the nation as a whole. Two other ladies come flying before them with wings that are like a bird. I think there's a word for it even. And they take her up in the basket and they remove her back to Shinar, or a place near Babylon. This is a figurative way of saying, maybe the sin you brought with you from Babylon, folks, we just need to take that back. I'm going to remove all the sin from your presence. This becomes very important because it's now the confidence of removing the sin of the individual, removing the sin of the country. And they're cleaning, purging the country as it will, so that they will be a country that will enjoy their relationship with God. And not only that, they will be such a nice place that the countries around them will want to join them. We hear of those who had placed their lot with the religious feelings or religious sentiments of the Jews, the proselytes, as it were, from other places. This is the purpose of removing the sin. I've written so much here, I have to depend on it. Now, we see that God hates sin. He gets rid of it, or he removes it from them. The meaning of the vision is that God will send wickedness or sin from his people and forgive them. You notice a pattern here now. He's forgiven the priests. He's restored their confidence. He's forgiven the people their sins. He has forgiven the country as a whole and said, the things that got you into these problems 70 years ago that sent you to captivity, I will forgive. I will bring you back into that relationship where I care for you. Basically, if you consider it, God does three things, or can do any of three things with sin. He will prohibit it, He will punish it, or He will forgive it. And you can see in various instances throughout these visions how He addresses sin in their midst and removes it from them. Finally, we come to the last vision that we'll have. The vision in chapter 6 of the 4 chariots going forth. I turned and raised my eyes and looked and beheld 4 chariots were coming from 2 mountains. The mountains were mountains of bronze. First chariot was, with the first chariot were red horses, and the second chariot black horses, the third chariot white horses, and the fourth chariot dappled horses, or we'd call them dapple grays. And these are very strong animals that are willing to go about, want to get to their task of going to the various directions. The angels said, this is verse 5, that these are the 4 spirits of heaven who will go out from their station before the Lord of all the earth. The one with the black horses is going to the north country. The whites are going with them. The dappled are going to the south country. God is going to send His spirits again at the earth. Now look at this difference. In the first vision, He went out and patrolled and saw the problems. In the last vision, He sends not just horses with riders, but He sends chariots. Chariots are the equivalent of the war-making tank of the time. Those chariots are going out to destroy or in some way cause God's vengeance to be taken on the countries. So He goes to the north country, read Babylon and Babylonian Assyria, and He sets them, they're not countries we deal with anymore. They're gone. He has His way with the opposition of the country before Him. He takes care of them. And so you can say He has addressed in these 8 visions the needs of the people, how to come back to Him, how to rebuild a nation, how to rebuild a temple, how to restore the services, how to restore the relationship of the priesthood, how to deal with countries all round about Him. Simple summary of the 8 visions is this. First one was the red horse. God would cause His people to prosper and He'd punish their enemies. That's in the first one. The second ones, there were the 4 horns and the 4 craftsmen. The nations that overcome Judah would be themselves overcome. The third vision was a measuring line. It was carried about by a man, and God actually says, you won't even need to build a wall around this city. It's going to be so prosperous and it's so filled with people and animals. I will take care of it. I will provide for the safety and security of the nation. The fourth vision is Joshua the high priest in his dirty clothes, his dirty turban. He is restored. He is given new clothes, new turban, and he is given a charge to execute faithfully his responsibilities to lead the people and to teach them and to accomplish things. Finally, that means that the priests would be forgiven of sins and they themselves would be cleansed. The golden lampstand with the 2 olive trees beside it is where Zerubbabel is appointed, and he would finish rebuilding what he created before. The flying scroll, of course, is the law and how it applies with the people and how they will be judged and how they cannot separate from them. Finally, next to the last, the ephod with a woman who's lifted away and sins are removed from the nation. And finally, the 4 chariots patrolling the earth and how they will take care of the enemies of the people. And there you have the 8 visions of Zechariah. I thank you. I think we've got people outside the doors. Come on in.